Hey guys, welcome back here to today's edition of the Fishing Teacher. Appreciate you guys tuning in for today's episode. And guys, today I want to have a little talk with everybody about, we got 2026 coming up. And if you can do one thing in 2026, I want to talk about one technique that I just really want you guys to stay open-minded about and give this a try. It is something that has been working for me for 45 years. It still works today. It's a forgotten technique. I want to get into that in today's video, and that is flipping and pitching an old school jig, just shallow water flipping and pitching with a big full-size jig. I don't mean a little finesse jig. I don't mean the creature bait. I don't mean flipping a worm or a tube. I'm talking about a full-size jig like my Blaukat Throwback jig. I want to explain to you guys why this is something you need to learn how to do. And if you used to do it and have stopped doing it, or if you've never done it, I'm going to explain to you guys why it is the one technique you guys need to get into this coming year. And also, guys, we will be talking about jigs, so I'll put my my Blaukat Throwback jig in the description of this video. This is a perfect jig for what I'm talking about. It's a full-size living rubber jig. Comes in 6 different colors, 3 different sizes. It's the one you want for this type of fishing, so we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, let me get this. My wife just texted me, and I've got to get this text. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, guys. When your wife texts, you got to respond to it. And, that's just part of the videos here, man. I don't make any, excuses for it. My channel is rough around the edges, man. I got poor editing skills. I do the videos whenever I can in my truck or outside or whatever. It's just sort of you get what you get. But one thing for sure, guys, is I'm trying to share with you guys some good hogging information that's going to help you guys catch some fish, and that's the point of today's video here. Okay, now this flipping and pitching deal, guys, nobody does it anymore. Back from about when I really got into it back in the mid 80s up until about the early 2000s, it was a dominant force in tournament fishing. It's like tournaments were consistently won flipping and pitching. And it got a little bit less and less and less over the years went on. And eventually it got to the point where about the only times that you saw people winning tournaments flipping and pitching were like in Florida, like flipping mats or something like that. And then that even went away, when Live Scope took over. So it's something you don't hear people doing anymore. And it still works just as good. The only thing about it, guys, is people have lost the ability to do it. They don't really know how to do it. They don't know the water to look for. They don't know how to set the bait up. They don't know how to do everything right. Now, I should be back in the tackle room when I describe this, but I'll do the best I can because I'm trying to do these videos at every spare second that I got. First of all, guys, you need an old school flipping stick. I use that Mega Bass Alkalies, and you need heavy line. I use 25-pound test, Seaguar and Vizex fluorocarbon 99% of the time for it. I don't use braid. I use fluorocarbon line. And you want heavy line, because the heavy line not only will help you get the fish out of heavy cover, but it has a lot to do with the way that the jig falls. The way that the jig falls with heavier line is a lot more attractive to a bass than using a little bit lighter line. So sorry about the noise here, guys. I'm at the gym parking lot. Everybody's sort of getting out here. So that's the first thing to remember is that. The next thing with it is the jig. Now, there's 2 different type of jigs available. You got silicone skirted jigs and you got living rubber jigs. 95 or 98% of the jigs on the market today are silicone skirted jigs. And the reason people use silicone skirted jigs is that it's cheaper and easier for a manufacturer to make them, because all they do is they cut out these layers, they put a collar on them and slip them over the skirt and call it good. And I still do use silicone occasionally, like in real clear water, for like when I'm using a green pumpkin skirt or something. Like a noisy ass, hot rod there. But 95% of the time I'm using living rubber, because the reason living rubber is the best flipping jig is, I've talked about this before, it puts out a glow in the water and it has an action that silicone can't duplicate. Silicone does not breathe the way that living rubber does. And my Blaukat Throwback jig is one of the few living rubber jigs out there. And that is the key to being a master flipper, is to do it with living rubber. All the great flippers I have ever fished with, that's what they use. Tommy Biffle, Terry Thomas, all the freaking masters at it. Denny Breyer back in the day. So that's going to help out. The next thing that's going to help you out with old school flipping is to go to a chunk type trailer. Now, Pork Frog still works good, But the closest thing to a pork frog today is that Zoom Big Salty Chunk. I'll link both of these in the video. I'll put my Tackle Warehouse link in the description with my Blaukat Throwback jig and the Zoom Big Salty Chunk. The Big Salty Chunk is just like an old school #1 pork frog. And the bulk that jig creates with that Big Salty Chunk on there is a key element to catching and flipping and pitching on that jig. So that's the setup with it. The next thing when you're pitching and flipping is that you have to get the right weight on your jig in order to get the bite with it. And there's 2 primary sizes that I use, 3 occasionally. I use a 3/8 ounce size, and I use a 1/2 ounce size, and sometimes a 5/8. Those are the 3 sizes that we make in my jig. If I'm fishing off colored water, like the water visibility is like less than 1.5 feet or something, and the cover is shallow and the cover is not real thick. Say for example, I've got 15 inches of visibility and I'm pitching it around a cypress tree or a laydown log or a laydown tree in the water, and the water depth is less than 5 foot deep, I'll use the 3/8 in that situation. But if the cover's a little bit thicker and I'm trying to penetrate something a little heavier, like a flooded bush or some type of a grass bed or something like that, or if I'm fishing a little deeper, say the cover is in 4 or 5 or 6 foot of water, I'll go to the 1/2 ounce or the 5/8. Most of the time it's a 1/2. The only time I do use the 5/8 is if it's really, really windy. Say the wind's blowing 20 miles an hour and it's got a bow in my line. Now that will, offset that extra weight and make you do a little bit more efficient. So that's the setup with it. You have got to fish and you got to pitch that jig around some type of cover. Occasionally you can catch them just pitching bare rocky banks, but most of the time, guys, you have got to have some type of an ambush point. Now that ambush point can be the edge of a dock, it could be a dock piling, it could be a brush pile, it could be a log in the water, it could be a laydown tree, it could be a lily pad field, it could be whatever the shallow cover is. But you got to be in and around some type of a shallow water, object in the water. And I prefer the jig to drop vertical into that cover. So I want the jig to be hanging over something. I want it to be hanging over a lily pad. I want it to be hanging over matted grass. I want it to be hanging over a limb. I want it to be, if I can get it to hang over something, that's what I want. Not necessarily you have to have it. I've caught a ton of fish just pitching next to a log and working it out, and the jig will start swimming away from it. Don't get me wrong, but in a true flipping and pitch and bite scenario, it's always better if that jig is vertical, hanging over something. It just seems like it triggers those fish a little bit better. That's another thing with it. Another thing with that, guys, to learn is you got to be accurate with it. You got to be able to put that bait where you want to, and you need to be able to put that bait as quietly as you can in there. That makes a big difference. The accuracy and how quiet that bait enters the water a lot of times means all the difference between catching and pitching and flipping or not. And then finally on the jig, guys, you don't want, when you're flipping and pitching a big jig, you want to hop that thing off the bottom. You don't want to just sit there and shake it in one spot. You want to hop that jig off the bottom, a foot or 2 off the bottom. That's always going to trigger the bigger strikes. And the last thing to remember is when you're pitching and flipping, you're always going to catch bigger fish on a dark colored jig. Black and blue, solid black, black and chartreuse will always get your bigger fish. You'll catch more fish like on a brown, some type of brown or green, but you will not catch the size as on the dark jig. So anyway, guys, that's just a few things to remember about old school flipping. If there's one thing that you can do coming up this year, give it a try, man. Just pull out that flipping stick and get on the bank and just start going down the bank, flipping and pitching. It's a fun way to catch them. So hope it helps out.